And that's because we want to share this and what we've captured today with wider audiences where we can. So we're recording the session today. Welcome, I'm Michelle Kitney. I'd just like to hand over to my colleague Marg to quickly introduce herself, and then to Heidi, and then we'll get cracking.
Kia ora everyone, I'm Marg McLaughlin and I'm Communications Manager at Volunteer in New Zealand. Good to see you all today.
Kia ora everyone, I'm Heidi Quinn from Volunteer in New Zealand, a volunteer management lead, and it's lovely to host you all today.
Awesome. So thanks for joining us today. The purpose of today is to mark tomorrow, but ahead of tomorrow, World Volunteer Managers Day, and to acknowledge the work that you do every day to enable, support, lead, manage, empower volunteers. And we hope to provide you with an update with a range of research that's come out over the last couple of years, and provide a space for you to reflect. And if you feel like it, share back what you might need most on your journey ahead as we go through. So for just a sort of a brief introduction to Volunteering New Zealand, we've been around since 2001, and we were created in response to the needs and wants of the sector, the volunteer centres that were there at the time, and in collaboration with the Department of Internal Affairs. We've got approximately 100 national members, including the 17 volunteer centres, or 17 to 20 volunteer centres, and sitting under those organisations are a further 10,000 community organisations across them all too. And a key role for us is to speak up for volunteers and organisations that work through a volunteer workforce, and of course for volunteer managers. And we've just gone through a process of updating our strategic plan, and it kind of looks pretty much the same in terms of our key focuses, in terms of whakamana, recognising the value of volunteering, hapai, advocating for an inclusive, diverse and impactful volunteering landscape, and arataki, so working alongside the sector to lead volunteering in Aotearoa New Zealand. And we achieve this strategic focus or goals through advocacy, research, best practice guidelines and other tools. When we can run it, a national conference and workshops, webinars and more. And a key part of our who we are and what we do is our members and the wider sector that we connect in with. So we're excited to have you here today for IMV Day. The theme is many backgrounds, one profession stronger together. And we know that volunteer managers have responded, been part of the response to the challenges over the last couple of years, and have led with leadership and created partnerships and collaborations, and enabled I guess the whole sector to thrive. So volunteer managers, leaders, enablers, coordinators are vital to the successful volunteer involvement. So today I'm just going to take you through some insights and research and frameworks. We hope will give you a bit of a boost to your day-to-day mahi and knowledge, and we're really keen, if you think about through the course of this, what would help you most in your role as someone who works with volunteers, who leads, who enables and manages volunteers? We'll ask that question at the end and give you guys some time to share it back. But feel free to drop stuff into the chat as we go along. My colleagues will be monitoring it. Feel free to ask questions as well. If we can't answer them as we go, we will try and answer them at the end or answer them after the session. So awesome. So I'm often asked about what the state of volunteering is looking like, and it's actually kind of hard to say because it's quite complex. We've come through a very complex time, and there were already sort of exacerbated or heightened some of the things we were seeing before COVID. but we know that there are also, and we know that COVID's had uneven impacts on our sector and in how it's expressions of volunteering in different places and spaces. And so what I thought I'd do today is just take, kind of give you an overview of a few things, because in 2020 we last did our State of Volunteering report, and that was the first time we did a State of Volunteering report that included a survey of volunteers as well as a survey of organisations. So that was the first time we did that, and the data from that was collected literally just before the pandemic hit our shores. So at the time, it didn't feel like a very good time to have just done a State of Volunteering report piece of research, but actually provides a good bookmark before the pandemic hit. Through the pandemic, we did a range of different research, with some of our key stakeholders and also with some of our collaborators, and we produced some collaborative research. And what we're also doing right now, and I'll give you a bit of a sneak preview, so to speak, of some of the highlights from our State of Volunteering 2022 as we go through, as well as some other awesome stuff. So in addition to the stuff that we've done, there's other stuff out there that I'm going to show you as well. I'm just noting, Heidi, that I actually can't see any of the questions as they come up. So if anything vital, because of all the screens and stuff, anything vital comes up in the questions, will you let me know? Awesome. So before looking at even the State of Volunteering 2020, we know from our previous work, and I know this won't surprise any of you, that there's some significant long-term trends that were surfacing globally around volunteer involvement. Globally, we were seeing more people, for a while we were seeing actually more people volunteering, doing less hours. And I think that's actually changing with some data I'll show you later in the session. There's definitely been internationally the sort of civic core where, and the numbers quite static across countries, or Western countries at least, that about 14% of people were doing approximately 50% of the hours of volunteering. We know the way that volunteers want to engage is changing. How they want to volunteer is changing. That's been reported in all sorts of places and spaces. And we know also, a global worldwide trend that demographics are changing quickly, particularly in New Zealand. We've got more young people, we've got more old people, and we've got a more diverse community as well. The slides can be circulated. In fact, the whole video will be circulated, so just seeing that. Moving along. Sorry, the mute is sitting over my thing. The taskbar is in the wrong place. Okay, bear with me a sec. So, as I mentioned, the State of Volunteering 2020 had pre-COVID data, and the surveys closed in 2020. So there's so much information on our website. We'll just give you an overview today, but and we'll provide links afterwards to all these different sources of information should you want to look at them in more detail. In 2020, the State of Volunteering report canvassed 4 key themes around community, diversity and inclusion, engagement and recognition of volunteers, funding, administration and regulatory compliance, and management and strategy. So it's got chapters on all 4 of those things, and it brings the survey data from both the volunteers and the organisations together to analyse those things. And what we saw in 2020 State of Volunteering, particularly of note, is and this is probably an ongoing trend and still an issue across the sector. High level of older volunteers and challenges engaging younger volunteers. So some of the challenges experienced and reported through the State of Volunteering 2020 relate to recruiting and retaining volunteers was a key issue for organisations. A lack of volunteers was reported as an issue. Recognition of volunteer commitment in that report was shown to be inconsistent, with some organisations acknowledging their volunteers in certain ways while others not having any formal avenues of doing so. Reimbursement for volunteers out of pocket expenses was variable, and in that survey only 32% of the organisations were doing so consistently. In our report 2020, volunteers reported an increased preference for episodic and project-based volunteering. So just to sort of highlight that, actually the survey numbers for those, about 600 organisations were surveyed and 1,300 volunteers. So really good data sets that we're bringing this information from. Barriers to volunteering were identified as competing vocational, social, educational and caring commitments, and they were cited as the biggest barriers. In the 2020 report, motivations for volunteering sat around developing skills, connecting with and helping our communities. They were the things that were cited as the biggest motivations for volunteering. And a thing that I really love to highlight from the State of Volunteering Report 2020 is that 82% of respondents intended to continue with their current volunteering role long term. So for those who were recruiting and getting people on board, they were having people stick around and planning to stick around despite potential preferences for shorter term or different ways of volunteering. So I think that's a real positive. And we do have a stat for that from our 2022 survey coming out as well. So we went on to, like many people and many organisations, to collaborate as a kind of key way of working through COVID. And we, in 2020, so after we'd finished our 2020 State of Volunteering Report, we actually quickly joined in with Philanthropy New Zealand, the Centre for Social Impact and Hauora Community Aotearoa, and we did a survey of organisations, so not volunteers, just organisations, smaller organisations in particular, to see how they were impacted by COVID. And that was, a report was released in late 2020. We actually repeated the same survey in 2021, and that was just in collaboration with Hauora Community Aotearoa. And so the sort of key three findings were that demand for services were rising. So this is talking about the 2021 one, and the data for this was collected sort of between I think May 21 to just up to the Delta lockdown. So it's a reasonably good snapshot of where we were mid 21. Obviously things got harder after that, but demand for services had risen and typically had not gone back down. Pandemic pressures created further strains in budgets, staffing and service delivery issues. So this is what organisations were reporting in. But what many of us would have experienced is, despite all of this, our sector showed tenacity and flexibility, and we actually stepped up and just continued to serve the increasing demands of our community as best we could. A couple of key headlines that from that research, I think, to share though is we found that certain communities were more greatly affected. So the disability community was affected with additional stresses and lockdowns, and volunteers of migrant and refugee backgrounds experienced particular stresses as well. And this report highlighted that staff and volunteer wellbeing was being impacted by increased demands for services, lack of funding, and compounding issues facing communities, and the general impacts of working in a pandemic environment. Despite that, at August 21, before the Delta lockdown, levels of optimism were high, though energies were potentially starting to wane. What's really interesting about this research is we were able to surface positives and some information that helped us, things we learned about how we, what worked well in our responses to COVID. And actually, a key highlight was that the pandemic created the conditions for more collaborative and less competitive approaches to funding. People in the sector were strengthened and enabled by each other, and whakawhanaungatanga and local mobilisation had a key impact on being able to deliver services and continue to operate in a pandemic, in the sort of changed environments, but also impacted on sense of well-being for those organisations and communities. And actually, people were reporting deeper connections within and across communities at that point. I think the things that surfaced out of that research as well relate to ways of looking forward, strategies for change. So ways that were successful ways of operating that came highlighted in the report include harnessing local relationships, kin-based relationships, on the ground relationships. It highlighted the real importance of close, trusted, supported relationships on the ground within communities, and that closer collaboration and connection were really important elements of success throughout for organisations through the that COVID pandemic time. And looking forward, incentives for collaboration potentially something that are needed, and provision of places and spaces for collaboration will also be something that we should invest in. So this piece of research had some really great data, and Huia Community Aotearoa actually went on to do a sort of data dive with the Good Data Institute. And I'm just sort of, the next couple of slides are kind of quite detailed and not expecting us all to kind of spend a lot of time analysing them, but I just wanted to highlight them because the collaboration and the data dive has surfaced some really interesting headline information around smaller organisations, and I think that's really important for us to know about, particularly when we know that our volunteer organisations are often have, 90% of our organisations in the not-for-profit sector are volunteer run, so we're all in that, a lot of us are in that smaller space. So the headlines really are that the organisations with the smallest annual budgets experienced the largest revenue declines in the COVID environment. So this is mid last year, and it's I'll just take you through a few of the slides now. Nearly half of all the organisations surveyed with a budget under 100k experienced revenue decline as well. So that's something to highlight. So what the deep dive of the data showed is that smaller organisations were less likely to receive government funding, and more likely to be reliant on other supports from the community, or receive no support at all. And a huge 71% of larger organisations in the survey, so annual budgets over 500k, received government funding during COVID. So the slides are a bit detailed, but I will share the link for if you want to have a look at this in more detail, because it's all there, and Hauora have done a really great job of surfacing this stuff. And there was a correlation between the impacts of like less funding and service delivery. 36% of organisations with a budget of less than 100k made cuts to service delivery during that time, and so you can also see that there's actually, they've cut the data so they can see that some sectors were more affected by decreases in volunteering, and others were saw an increase as well. The data also looks at, I can see someone's just coming. The data cut looked at top 3 needs by organisational size. So the smaller organisations under 50k revenue indicated their biggest need was for more volunteers. As we go up the level, it's more about support with fundraising. And we're also able to look at it in terms of sector, so the support needs by organisation of area. So you can see that those organisations in the rangatahi youth development space, housing, faith-based disability and elderly services, their greatest need was volunteers, and you can see that tracking through for other organisations. So just to quickly summarise the shared research, we saw in 2020 fundraising, marketing and communications, digital technology, innovation and strategic advice being the key things that organisations needed to support with. So that correlates with a lot of the anecdotal information we've seen. In 2020, we did on the ground here a lot of organisations having more volunteers than they potentially needed, and I guess that's probably related to their a lot of the restrictions they were operating under. And by 2021, the top 4 supports we need coming out of this research are more volunteers and fundraising. Then it's digital technology, marketing and communications. As I said, there's a lot more information on that which can be dived into from the Hauora website, and we'll send you the link to that. So another piece of research that came out just late last year, although it's called the World Volunteering Report 2022. It's a World Volunteering Report, State of Volunteering, and I wanted to highlight it to you guys, just a few key things from it. And it kind of looks at things from a more global perspective, but it does pick up on issues that affect us here in Aotearoa. So increasing inequalities, the climate emergency, the COVID pandemic, and it sort of pulls everything together and explores the role and the way that volunteering is able to support us building forward better. And actually, I just love the way it frames volunteering as part of the solution for actually transforming many of the kind of key global issues and local issues, particularly environmental and social systems. Some of the key findings from this report were that volunteerism offers diverse pathways to civic participation, but remains unequal in people's access to volunteering. So some groups are less able to access the benefits and opportunities of volunteering. It also highlights the real vital, and this is sort of a theme that's come through the COVID research here and in other places, but the vital role of partnerships to address the most facing challenges, and the power of volunteering to be part of those solutions. The next slide. So the World Volunteering Report looks at a whole pile of topics and is nicely cut up into chapters. So if you can go and have a little look, there's a couple of chapters around advocacy and how you talk to governments and decision makers and things like that, which we've obviously been looking at closely ourselves. So but I just wanted to highlight this particular screen. The World Volunteering Report notes that volunteering and how it happens is complex, and that it means different things to different people. And we know that here in Aotearoa. And globally, there's a greater recognition of informal volunteering and an acknowledgement of cultural and community-based values and how that influences how giving or volunteering or contributing to communities is practiced. And instead of kind of focusing on a definition of volunteering that we can all share, which is kind of not really feasible, I don't think, it actually provides this framework for thinking about volunteering. So it shifts from precisely defining volunteering to looking at these 5 characteristics. So mutual aid, service, campaigning, participation, and also acknowledging in some places and spaces that volunteering is a leisure activity of some sort. It also looks at, so it's the sort of categories and ways of thinking about voluntary action or activities, but then it kind of looks more broadly also at the practices. So ways of thinking about talking about volunteering include structure, online, intensity, inspiration, and the categories of volunteering. I just really love that way of framing it and giving us just different ways of thinking and talking and describing volunteering. I'm going to go for time. Cool. Okay, so you can access the World Volunteering Report off our website if that interests you. We have a State of Volunteering Reports page, which includes our stuff, plus previous international World Volunteering Reports. While I was actually on holiday, Statistics New Zealand went and updated their data, which is awesome. So some of the, so this is just sort of taking it back into Aotearoa and looking at the General Social Survey. And this is New Zealand-based population level data that I'm about to talk about. And the data that this relates to was collected from April 2021 through to, again, the Delta lockdown. I think typically the General Social Survey would run for a year. They've collated it over 4 months and reportedly say there's not a difference in terms of the quality of the results. I do want, we do have to bear in mind that the time frame of this may impact on the information we had about volunteering from it, but I still want to share the information from this because there's some really exciting stuff in it. And it's just exciting actually that it's been updated. So the last time this was updated was 2016. So we've been looking at, the wellbeing indicators and the living standards framework both take from this data a measure about volunteer wellbeing and community wellbeing. So the fact that it's been updated means we have new fresh data, which is awesome. So what's interesting is that we already knew this, but half of us volunteer, and that's people over 15, because of the way they surveyed this. But and actually we've seen a slight increase in this number, so it's up to 50.7. In the 2016 survey, it was around 49.3, I think. So we've seen an increase in volunteering. And what I should point out, that this survey, if you're not familiar with it, is looking at both direct volunteering, so informal volunteering, and also organisational volunteering. So it's if you've seen the NIPSA, the non-profit satellite information account, which tells you about who volunteers in organisations, you'll see a number. It counts approximately 1 million people volunteering, but that's within organisations. So the Statistics New Zealand survey steps out and also measures informal direct volunteering. So what we're seeing through this data, and this was the same in 2016, is that more people are volunteering informally, directly, than through organisations. And we've seen more women volunteer than men, and that has been a statistically true in other data sources for a while, but this number is actually, the difference between men and women's volunteering percentages have kind of gone apart. So women are doing more and men are doing a little bit less. And actually in the 4 weeks that so the way they count it, essentially we see 36 million hours being contributed over a 4-week period, which, extrapolating that out, that becomes 9 million a week, or 468 million per year, which is awesome. And something that was really awesome, and I think we can all take this away as well, we probably already knew this, but people who volunteered rated life as more worthwhile on average than those who did not volunteer. It's 8.1 out of 10 versus 7.9, but definitely a bump. Another interesting fact from this statistics data is that 6% of people who don't volunteer, they actually see no barriers to volunteering. So, and that some people would prefer to give money and not time. So it's kind of good to bear that in mind. And this probably isn't a surprise for many of us, but those who volunteered, environmental volunteerism grew in popularity. So, and quite a big bump from 6.9% to 11.1%. I guess it is quite a big time frame between 2016 to 21. So, but that's an interesting statistic. And I think something also to highlight is that those who are volunteering more time compared to 2016. So that sits in contrast to some of the data we'd received before 2016 about more people doing less hours. What we're seeing is those who volunteered, their amount of volunteering hours has increased by a couple of hours a month. And 20% of people are volunteering over 25 hours a month. So again, this information is accessible on our Volunteering New Zealand site on the statistics page, volunteer statistics page. So in terms of the time frame that we're tracking, we're now pretty much at the point where we're about to release our State of Volunteering report, State of Volunteering in Aotearoa 2022. So we've basically been working on this since 2020 after we released the 2021 in July. We worked with some of our key stakeholders who were very interested in the 2020 report and actually designed with them what our research focus would be before we actually launched into actually doing the mahi. And again, we've surveyed volunteers and organisations. We launched our surveys for this in March and April, and so they ran across March, April, May this year. And we also have run over the last 18 months, where possible, where we could do stuff face-to-face, focus groups, and collated stories from targeted groups, tangata whenua, youth, and volunteers with lived experience of disability. We had a huge response, 500,000 words in our free text answers, so my team have been very busy, and we've got some really interesting insights. And the report is going to be released in December, all going to plan. And my team have done a really, really, really amazing job. I just want to acknowledge Marg, Heidi and Johan and the work that they do here at Volunteering New Zealand, particularly our researcher Johan, who is actually based in Oxford and works for me remotely. Just to give you a little sneaky highlight, word of mouth is still important, but different across different demographics. So, so these are building out from some of the themes that you'll see in the report. A disconnect has been shown between organisations and volunteers on how they talk about the benefits of volunteering. So there's some work that we could all do there. Motivations to volunteer, a desire to contribute to the community, and definitely seen in our data a connection between organisations with digital infrastructure around volunteer management and retention of volunteers. So look forward to inviting you to a full State of Volunteering Report 2022 webinar in December onwards. Before I move on from that, though, I will share you, because we've done stories, we've done focus groups, we've got some really great voices throughout the State of Volunteering Report 2022, particularly young people and Māori. But the nature of, so this is from one of our younger volunteers who participated in a focus group. The nature of volunteering evolves, and those who complain about not enough young people joining should perhaps ask themselves, why don't more young people want to join our organisations? What are we doing wrong that is putting off young people from joining? I think that really captures what we probably all know, that it actually, the work to engage youth and younger volunteers actually happens at needs to happen at an organisational level. And another quote so we actually got heaps and heaps of, unsurprisingly, COVID insights as well. We know that looking forward, we really don't necessarily need to know all the stuff about COVID, but we're going to focus on the things in the report, what we've learnt and what are the lessons and things that we can take forward. But this is one of the sort of summaries. Many participants, despite supporting the general approach of mandates, vaccines, nevertheless noted that they have resulted in much polarisation and angst among different factions of their organisations. And this has introduced an aspect of negativity to the volunteering experience, with the usually social place turned into a more prescriptive environment with stricter rules. So that's kind of, and probably the timing of it, when we collected this information, impacts on that sentiment, but it was a very, very strong sentiment across respondents about the impact of the operational restrictions across COVID. Other kind of COVID highlights is that particularly that the impact of COVID-19 has not been homogeneous or constant among different groups and individuals. So some volunteering organisations have grow in their volunteer workforce and done, started to do new programs and new things, but others have, struggled, particularly things like organisations like op shops or organisations who were working with or for ageing or vulnerable communities and volunteers. I wanted to so that's kind of where the research is at. Obviously there's more out there, and we look forward to very soon offering a full webinar debrief of our State of Volunteering 22. We're very excited about that. But I just wanted to quickly talk about a couple of other things we're working on that relate to volunteer managers. So some of you may be familiar with the fact that we have best practice guidelines. Some of you may not, and others of you may know that we're reviewing our best practice guidelines. They were designed in 2011 and to support and develop managers and coordinators of volunteers in New Zealand, and they work alongside our competencies for volunteer managers and our best practice toolkit, which those are all available on our website. And so we're reviewing the best practice guidelines in particular from an inclusion and accessibility lens, and also with a question about what more can they do or provide into the future. And we're also looking at new ways of framing the best practice guidelines to make them more accessible and relevant to now and into the future. And we're looking at new frameworks like a volunteer life cycle framework, and we have a particular focus on smaller organisations. I'm going to move on to my next slide, but I guess we're also, as part of it, we are looking to, I guess, build from our State of Volunteering report, which surveys volunteers and organisations, to potentially having something where we hear from volunteer managers as well. So we are, we've got a pilot volunteer manager survey in the field that we're trialling, and what we really is to help us know more about the experiences and needs of volunteer managers, but also to help us gather some information about the focus within the best practice guidelines. So I just wanted to highlight those things to you, that they're some of the things that we're doing. I'd love to hear now from you guys if you have any questions or what, and but also in particular, and thinking, this is a time for us to think about people who lead, manage and enable volunteers. What would help you most in your role, into the future, and what more could we, bring from a research point of view or a resources point of view or tools point of view to support and enable you guys in your mahi. I might just quickly, before that, I'll just share one slide and we'll flip back to it. But basically, also just reminding everybody that International Volunteer Managers Day is the next celebration, where we'll be celebrating the World Volunteering Day for volunteers, and artwork and the theme is available, and we'll send it out early next week. But just flipping back to this one, yeah, I'm going to have a look at the questions now to see what people have been asking. So I might stop sharing for a minute. Just have a look at all these people. So many people here. Thank you for coming. Hi, Lindy. So I'm just going to have a quick nosy at the chat. But I'd also just note, we kind of went through that kind of quickly. We know we've allowed an hour and a half, but actually we didn't think you'd want to hear from us just for a whole hour and a half. So there's an opportunity now to talk about what you need most. You can share it in the chat if you want to. And after that, we also have opportunity to look at a thing called the Givers Framework, which is a really great tool for thinking about volunteer engagement, which Heidi will take you through. That's an optional thing. Some people will be very familiar with it and won't want to necessarily have a look at it. But I'm just going to have a quick look at the questions. Can someone share something back? I can see a thank you from Tanya. Would you like to go to breakouts and talk to each other rather than us? No. Well, I can share the Givers Framework if no one wants to share back anything. No one wants to share the one thing that would make, can we see the slide on the key findings of the SOV? Sure. I can go back to that. The slides will be made available, and in due course you'll have a really great resource in the State of Volunteering Report. It's awesome, it's well written, it's easy to read, it's got recommendations. I'm really proud of my team, and we're just in the final throes of getting it peer reviewed and getting it forward and stuff like that. So the request was to go back to this slide. There you go, Brian.
Yeah, Kiara, thank you. Can you just expand on that disconnect between organisations and volunteers, where they talk about volunteering? That intrigued me quite a bit.
Yeah, so full disclosure, I don't want to go into the full details of the report because I don't want to I'll get in trouble with my researcher.
Okay, fair enough.
And we will provide more detail, but actually what's really exciting about it is that Johan has spent a lot of time thinking about this and has got us come up with a framework, or found a framework which talks about public, private and organisational benefits. And essentially what we're seeing in the data that we've got is a real disconnect between how you talk about volunteering in terms of those three categories. So organisations are typically talking about KPIs, money, organisational benefits, and that's what your volunteering will do for us. And volunteers are talking about public, so global benefits to community or benefits to themselves is what is motivating them. So yeah, it is just want to highlight it without kind of telling you everything about the State of Volunteering 2020. Yeah, but I'm very excited about that framing. Marg, would you add anything to that?
People did note when we heard back directly from volunteer managers, a lot of them said, oh, my volunteers love coming in, they get a lot out of it, they make friends. So we did see that they recognise the social and the connections benefits as well.
And I think some of the tension in particular is between larger organisations how they talk about volunteering benefits. I'm just going to check the chat. Any other questions about the slides? Anyone want to share anything that they might need or want? What's the one thing that would make the biggest difference for you as a volunteer manager? Or email me later, or do you have everything you need? Well, Heidi, shall we just quickly go to the givers framework then? Cool. Okay. Are you right speaking to the slides if I move them, Heidi?
Yeah, sure.
So Heidi's one of my awesome colleagues. I have such a great team. I am so lucky and privileged to lead and work with awesome people. So
Okay. So yeah, the givers framework. We just wanted to touch on this because we thought it might be a useful tool for you. So the givers framework has been designed by Sport and Recreation in the UK. It came out in about 2018. It's based on behavioural science, so it's using behavioural psychology to help you recruit, retain, and realise the potential of your volunteers. So the givers, each of those letters stands for something. I'll quickly run through what they are, but just so you know, you can download the whole givers framework for free from sportandrecreation.co.uk. But it is 140 pages. It's well worth a read, but it is 140 pages. But there is a 2-page summary. So I recommend you read the 2-page summary first to get a feel for it, and then do a deep dive when you have the sort of time and resource to do so. So just run through what the letters stand for in the givers framework. The G is for growth, and that reflects the wish of volunteers to grow as people, to grow as a person through their volunteering, build their skills and widen their horizons, or to see growth in their own community. So the more you can provide that growth opportunity, again, the more you're going to recruit, retain, and realise the potential of your volunteers. I for impact. This reflects the wish of volunteers to see the difference they have made to people's lives, nudging people with their impacts or the impact of the organisation. V for voice recognises the fact that people react to how messages they receive are framed and presented. E for experiences. This recognises that volunteers' time is scarce and that their need for easy enrolment and flexibility are recognised. So E could stand for ease as well as experience. R for recognition. This acknowledges the extrinsic motivators and the wish to be rewarded by volunteers, even if it's just by a simple thank you. And finally, socially. So it takes into consideration that volunteers are social beings who enjoy being with friends. So what's quite helpful is to have a reflect on your own organisation. And are you currently meeting those categories, or is there areas of improvement, something to think about? It's a lot to take in. But is there any thoughts around that, or did anybody want to share their thoughts with the room for perhaps how they might be already doing some of this stuff? Because sometimes this is a useful reflective tool to realise you're actually doing some of this stuff already, and that's fantastic. Anybody got any thoughts around that, or if I just bombarded you with too much information? No, that's easy.
I think it means that we can nicely finish. At least, is there anything more about that, Heidi? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you.
Yeah, I think it's something that's very well researched. You'll say it is from Sport and Recreation, but the concept of it is relevant to the whole community and voluntary sector. So even if you're not involved in sport and recreation, it's still very relevant. We've used this with most of our members as a resource to help guide their own volunteer management sort of journey. So it's really, really helpful. It's definitely worth an investment to have a look through, spend a bit of time on it. Absolutely.
So yes, I'm from Alzheimer's Taronga, and we're always telling our volunteers, or I'm telling the volunteers, about the impact that they will have on our clients just by generally socializing and being involved with activities of the befriending roles, and what their help and support is giving to our clients. So the impact is very important, because it also makes the giving of their time, I suppose, worthwhile, because everybody's time is precious. So the impact is very important. Yeah.
And you'll find, just from my own experience, when someone is younger, when I say younger, I mean sort of age 25 and under, before they even apply to volunteer for you, they want to know why, and they want to know the impact. So the better you can get at telling stories about your why it's important and what impact their volunteering will have, the more attractive you will be to potential volunteers, especially younger people. They need to know that their time is going to be properly used, properly respected and appreciated, and will really help fulfill your mission. Thank you, Sharon. Anyone else?
Hi there, I'm Karina Ledwas here, volunteer coordinator at Te Whatuora, Te Taukutamai. Yeah, this is a really awesome framework. It's just kind of got us kind of thinking and talking about the things that we, currently do well, and, other aspects we could improve on. But in terms of, the recognition, the experience, the socially rewarding aspects, we were talking about how we have this lovely volunteer center, and it's a real hub for volunteers to come together and chat and debrief after their shifts. In terms of sharing stories and things like that too, we find our newsletter a really great opportunity. We include a lot of patient testimonials, staff testimonials, volunteer testimonials, and a lot of ways, stories around ways in which the volunteers are making a difference. Yeah, social media. And yeah, we were also, mentioning how, we are lucky in that we are able to provide reimbursements in terms of car parking and food vouchers, which is really lovely. But one thing I was thinking about in terms of impact is, we've been talking about conducting more surveys with the client group around gathering data around the impact. Just thinking about how that could be really beneficial too, so volunteers can read, oh gosh, 95% of patients say that they've had their patient experience has had a positive impact by volunteering. So that's kind of something for us to think about in terms of some of those next steps. But yeah, it's a fantastic framework. Thank you for sharing that.
Great. Glad it's helpful. And also remember, as I mentioned, is self-reflective, so it helps you understand what you're already doing well and just building on that. It's not designed to make you think, oh God, I'm not doing anything right. It's a really empowering tool. So thank you for your feedback, Corinne. Appreciate that. Anybody else got any thoughts? There's no right or wrong answer with this stuff either. It's just wherever you're at, and that's okay.
It'd be great to continue this kind of conversation after our State of Volunteer report comes out with that set of information. And so I've just actually been at the IAVA World Volunteering Conference. We're lucky to be able to go. And I was able to also connect in with a global network for volunteer leadership, which I've been part of as part of being an IAVA member. And it made me think about what we could do more for volunteer managers and leaders in terms of a similar sort of network opportunity where we could come together and just talk about real practical stuff on a regular basis and network and connect. Because I think sort of what Heidi's alluded to really is that you guys are already doing amazing stuff, all of you, and each of us can learn from each other and share great tips, tricks, learnings, how we've done it in our own organisations, as we've two speakers have just shared with us. So that's something on our mind at the moment. In the chat. Thanks, Julie. So did anyone else want to share something? It seems like we can wrap up now if everybody is finished, but is there anything else? Has that loosened any thoughts for anybody? Is that kōrero? Well, it's great to have those contributions, and thank you, Heidi. And I just wish you all